as Lucy said, my name's Lorenzo, Chief Growth Officer at Paragon. I look after strategic growth across the digital business, and in there we tackle marketing, business and technology challenges, combining them to help our clients unlock new areas of growth and drive operational efficiencies for our clients. So today, I'm going to talk about really what's happening for companies since the pandemic, but I am going to spend quite a bit of time talking through things that actually are evergreen when it comes to digital transformation. And just because the world's changed doesn't mean we should forget some of the basics. So we're going to look in on the challenge. What is digital transformation? A bit of a kind of what is and what isn't, some success stories, and then we're going to spend a good sort of 10 or 15 minutes on the how with some practical advice. So yeah, looking forward to this. So what's the challenge? What's happening? Well, really, companies that have been content with steady state can no longer rely on that strategy thanks to COVID-19. They will have to adapt to survive, meaning there will be winners and there will be losers. And those that haven't done so already will be launching digital transformation or digitization programs in whatever shape makes sense for their category and size. And we'll talk a bit later about how some industries are responding and the winners and losers. And this man here, I mean, a few weeks ago, this was all over the press, but Satya Nadella at Microsoft, he said that they've seen 3 years worth of digital transformation in just 2 months of their third quarter. And Microsoft are at the sharp end of what's happening at the moment, from remote teamwork and learning to sales and customer service to critical cloud infrastructure and security. We have to solve this stuff now and adapt to a world of remote everything. And they're really, the way we see it, there's sort of 3 forces at play at the moment. There's the economy, and many categories, as we know, have been decimated by COVID-19, meaning they're having to fight the fight with less people and a lot more pressure on their P&Ls, and they'll have to do this for some time. And the first task is to stay alive and make sure that you've got a ticket to the next stage after the tide recedes. Then you've got your customers. And whether you're a B2B or B2C, that means responding to rapid online behavior shifts, meeting customers where they are, whether that be through sales, service or marketing. And a large amount of companies they just haven't done that thinking to make it happen overnight. And the old world won't return to the levels before. It just won't. Maybe it'll be 2/3. 1 in 5 grocery transactions in the past 3 months has been by first-time online shoppers, and a large amount older generation, and once they've experienced the frictionless process and they've done it 4 times, Ocado say they'll never go back. So that's a lot of people that won't be frequenting physical shops. And then something that we can all relate to is the employee dimension. So we've all felt this pain firsthand, and hopefully I won't feel any of it today, as we've struggled with our broadband connections, VPNs, multiple logins for Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Skype for Business. Oh, God, don't get me started on that. But in a short space of time, we've proved, homeschooling aside, that those in white-collar work can continue to be productive in a home environment and even thrive, given the right level of technology, which really leaves our business. And all of this means that to enable us to serve employees and customers in this new world, we need to retool our companies built on a digital foundation, which connects core business processes and supports fast decisions, putting data at the heart of the company. To succeed now and beyond, we all have to get used to interpreting data and using it to accelerate our decisions. So what is digital transformation? We're going to have a quick look at a few long-term success stories and some recent examples of graceful pivots during the pandemic. But first, let's just have a little look. So Gartner say that some organizations count migrating from on-prem systems to hybrid clouds as digital transformation. Others modernize their financial software using ERPs that incorporate real-time analytics. And more might use digital technology to improve customer experience. And some might even do all 3 of that and be really, really pleased with themselves. But without changes to core business process and the products that you're serving, all you're getting is optimization, not transformation. Because there's a chap, a very learned chap called George Westerman, who heads up the MIT Centre for Digital Business. And he says that successful digital transformation is like a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. Still the same organism, but it has superpowers. But when it's done wrong, all you have is a really fast caterpillar. And it's tough to keep up with your competitors when you're crawling and they're flying. So transformation in the early stages was all about saving money and driving efficiency. But now we have to think about how can we capture new revenue streams and use new business models to accelerate growth and leapfrog our competition. But we also have to be pragmatic, because if you're about to make your first steps into digital, you're better picking off some easy wins, building your company muscle memory before tossing out the baby with the bathwater. And a lot more on how we do that later. Napoleon Hill said that your big opportunity may be right where you are now. And whilst there are lots of people suffering, the changes over the past 3 months have opened up huge opportunities. And for those that understand how to harness digital, you will be listened to in ways you never imagined. I've talked to chief digital officers and digital directors that tell me their worlds have been turned upside down recently, and things that they've been wanting to do for years are essentially now being almost demanded of them from the business in weeks, probably with perhaps not as much budget and resources as they'd like, but nonetheless, the tide has turned. And for those making their first steps and finding it a bit overwhelming, well, just surround yourself with people that can support you and get comfortable being uncomfortable for a while, because this is going to continue. So let's look at a few examples of success stories. So I'm going to kick off with a very famous company. You know, this is not one that I've dragged from the depths of digital transformation stories, but I think it's the way they've moved over time that's really important to think about. So back in 97, Reed Hastings started Netflix. It was a DVD through the post business, but he did have a plan even then. And around 2007, most distributors were talking about film and series downloads as the future, but he was convinced that as Wi-Fi speeds increased, so would the possibility of streaming content where and when you wanted, and that could become a reality. So in 2007, they had 7.5 million subscribers. Their revenues were just under $1 billion. Then they decided to get into the content game. So they created original scripted content and are now the third largest spender on content behind Disney and Comcast. This year alone, they're forecasting 15 billion spend on content. And then there's their AI. So if I go to the home screen on Apple TV or Disney Plus, we see the same thing. But our Netflix screens are totally different. They've somehow figured out a way to incorporate some kind of AI or personal recommendation engine that is just far superior. And then sort of today, they're classed alongside, they're basically called one of the FANGs, so Facebook, Apple, Netflix, and Google. Their revenue is forecast at 22.8 billion this year. And actually, thanks to COVID, they actually added 15.8 million subscribers between mid-March and mid-April, which was more than double their 7.2 million target. And then we think, well, what next for a company like Netflix? What's the next big move? And some interesting thoughts around, well, maybe they should buy Spotify, because then they can own visual and audio content. They know how to monetize subscribers. Why not? Or there's also talk that they're looking at a freemium model, because they've saturated the market so much of slightly higher demographic people. But how do they reach the slightly lower demographic? Well, launch a freemium model and then rely on their algorithm to help convert them to paid subscribers. So I think it's a really interesting look at a company that just continues to reinvent itself throughout time and what that does to its valuation and subscribers. They're now at 184 billion valuation with over 185 million subscribers. So it's quite a change. And then the next one I'm going to look at is Lego. So they're a company that we've probably all encountered, whether it's our childhood or our current children. Back in 2004, there's no easy way of saying this, they were dying. They lost 228 million on 1 billion sales, and they knew they had to change. So early 2005, they had a new CEO in who was ex-McKinsey, and they set about rebuilding the core enterprise platform on SAP. And this became essentially the tightly integrated, bulletproof hardware and software that runs Lego beneath the humans. And in 2 years, they gained efficiencies of 11% on revenue, uplift in revenue, thanks to supply chain optimization that came through this platform. And then in 2016, they knew they had to go again. They had to make another leap because they were beginning to fall behind. So they realized that they needed more flexibility to be able to adapt to fast changing customer demands. So they built a digital engagement platform, which really is a loosely coupled collection of microservices built on top of the core enterprise platform. But what this enabled them to do was move to continuous delivery of functionality in a matter of days or weeks versus the 12 to 18 months on the enterprise platform. And today, it's all about working on transforming the workforce to meet the demands of the customer and the technologies. So, we all talk about becoming a data-driven decision-making company, and this is what's key for them. But it's also becoming less hierarchical and more viral in the way it makes decisions, and we'll touch on that a bit later as well. They also recently announced a partnership with Tencent, the Chinese tech giant, where over the next 2 years, they'll partner in areas including video, game, and digital child safety. And this really touches on another one of the trends, which is about building an ecosystem and partnerships as you move forward on your journey. And then I'm going to take the liberty to use one of our case studies actually at the moment. So if people are not familiar, Valley is a US mid-tier bank. Mid-tier for them means about the same size as the Co-op Bank in the UK, so around 42 billion assets under management. Last year, they asked us to help them unlock new areas of growth using digital products and services. So before we could set off building things, we had to help together set up the right ecosystem and assemble the right team and the right ways of working to give this a chance of being a sustainable program. Then, as they already had a bunch of ideas, and some of them were things like cannabis banking, we helped select the best candidates to launch based on 3 things: financial opportunity, the customer need, and the technical feasibility. And then we had to get going quickly, because 20 weeks later, we launched the first product. And from here, we'll learn about the first product, then we'll scale it with them, then we'll learn again, and then we'll go back, and the process will repeat with new products and services. So next up, we are going to have a little look at some COVID pivots and experiments from out in the wild. So first up, we've got P&G. So P&G have been threatening to launch e-commerce for a long time, but just couldn't make the unit economics work. And for them, COVID was just the reason that they just had to go hard on it. So they've launched that very recently. John Lewis is interesting as well. So we know they've been a pretty strong online player, but they're launching virtual appointments so that they can retain some of the service excellence that they're known for. And it's contextual. You can book on here. So John Lewis offers a huge array of in-store advice and support services in its stores, but at the moment customers can't get there, so they're pivoting to make these same services available online via video. And then another retailer, so Aldi, again, pre-COVID, they'd essentially decided that online retail wasn't for them because they just couldn't make the margin that they needed. But actually partnering with Deliveroo meant that they could continue to trade, and they're giving quite a bit of margin to Deliveroo, but actually it's worked out pretty well for them under the circumstances. Then we got smaller, sort of more niche things. So this is a North London restaurant, Top Cuvée, really cool brand. On day one of lockdown, these were a fairly new company, new restaurant. They got together and they thought, how are we going to stay alive and thrive? And by then there's not a playbook for this. So they decided to pivot to create an online shop selling food and drink. In the sort of 10 weeks, they've grown their customer base through social, 100% through social media. They've moved from 120 followers a day to 400. Now, I know that's a vanity metric, but most of those customers they know are going to go on to spend with them. So for them, e-commerce will remain a mainstay of their business long after COVID disappears. And I think this is something we're going to start to see now with shops reopening. People are going to be tempted to just go, oh, it's fine, we'll leave that e-commerce thing alone now. But you can't. You've got to keep going. And then finally, our favourite Heinz, established in 1869. This is the first time in their history they've been selling direct during COVID-19. And like Unilever, e-commerce is a small percentage of their sales, but it's a high percentage of their intelligence. And I think this is the really big play for direct-to-consumer. For the big CPG companies, it's not necessarily that this is the future of their revenue yet. However, it's where they learn so much about their customers that they just won't be able to learn through their wholesale distribution network. So it's really interesting. And I think that the message here is we've got to build flexibility, fluidity into our businesses so that we can continue to adapt as this situation unfolds. So that's the setup, what's happening, who's doing it well. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the 4 elements of transformation. So how do we do this? So this is according to Bain and the World Economic Forum, pretty reputable source. First up, you've got to think about your digital strategy. So where your business should be going. How do you make progress without knowing the end game? We don't know where this is going to end. We don't know where consumers are going to end. So we've got to be able to work in a fluid environment. Business model. So what your business actually does, and we're going to spend some time on this in a minute, but how do you rediscover the raw customer need unconstrained by the current business model? And then the enablers, which is, we all spend a lot of time here, but does your current data, technology, operating model, and talent enable or disable your digital progress? And then finally, there's sort of one of the most complex pieces, which is the orchestration. So this is how you manage the change along the way. Are you moving beyond experimentation to scaling digital technologies across the enterprise? So let's go a bit deeper on digital strategy. We're going to look at each one of these in detail now. So how do you ask yourself the question on where your industry is headed? So I've got a few ideas here. So first one is ask yourself, if we had a movie of our customers buying and interacting with our products and services in 10 years, what would it look like? Where could competitors or disruptors use technology to deliver a better customer experience, product, or service? And how might companies radically reduce the cost of serving customers in the future? And how might the industry ecosystem change in the future? Will we have new competitors or partners? And who will increase their size of the digital pie and why? So this really helps you think around where should you be going. And then I think to talk in a little bit more detail about rediscovering the raw customer need unconstrained by the current model, I'm just going to play a little clip from Jeff Bezos. So this was a conference actually back in 2016, but it just shows again how sort of ahead of his time he is. So this is Jeff responding to a question around how he thinks about the future of Amazon and how it remains competitive. Oh, that was good going, wasn't it?
Well, I think that the 3 big needle movers, in my opinion, we've thought this for 20 years, are selection, price, and speed of delivery. So delivery, convenience, delivery speed, and associated sort of attributes. And I think there's still a lot of progress to be made on those things. And then and also discovery. And I think if you get category by category, there's tons of invention remaining. I'm very excited about apparel and fashion, because I think that's a product category where you can do so much invention online. So over a 20-year time frame, I predict that selection, price, and delivery accuracy and speed will still be major drivers. It's impossible for me to imagine 20 years from now a customer saying, I love Amazon, I just wish you delivered a little more slowly. Or I love Amazon, I just wish you had less selection. Or I wish your prices were a little higher. So when you find, and I would urge all of you in your own businesses to think about that. Think about what are the things that you know will be true even 10 years from now. Because if those are stable in time, unlike everything else, your competitive set will change, your the technologies that you have available to you will change, but the customer needs, if you find the right ones, will tend to be stable in time. And then you can build strategies around those things. And all the energy that we put into making sure that we're delivering quickly will still be paying dividends 10 years from now, because it won't ever go out of style.
Thanks, Jeff. So yeah, for Amazon, what will people still want in 10 years? For them, it's range, so that's the marketplace. It's ease, they have 244 million homepages. Value, so Amazon Prime, so next year, they're forecasting 57% of US households will have Amazon Prime. I mean, that's just scary. And of course, there's speed, same day delivery. But also, I mean, if you think about what's happening to Amazon now, so reacting to customer need, he's now investing in creating the world's first vaccinated supply chain, right? It's really, really possible that in a year, 6 months' time, Bezos will be able to come out and say, if you want to guarantee that what you receive online is clean and there's going to be no disease, you can only shop with Amazon. So he's really, really pushing it to the next level here. And just before we move on, thinking about raw customer need, I just want to pick up on Brian Chesky from Airbnb. So he talks about in the early days commuting back and forth from California to New York in the early days to meet hosts and use their feedback to handcraft Airbnb service. And he asked them questions, and he learned that user profiles would make homeowners feel more comfortable about having guests, and that those profiles should include a photo and include where they work and where they went to school. And all of these insights fed back into Airbnb as the offering before it grew to a large scale. And I think there's a lesson there as well, which is just, you don't have to be optimized and efficient on day one. You'll get there, as they've proved, despite having a bit of problems during COVID. And then when you're looking at rediscovering the core, the raw customer need, you're going to discover some baggage. So if we look at automotive as an example, this is an industry that is kind of being torn on its head by Elon Musk and Uber. It's been upended because in the old days, or kind of today, you were selling a car, whereas in the future, it's about people want mobility service. And who do you sell it to? Well, it's individuals. Well, it's probably going to be fleets. How do people pay? At the moment, it's financing or leasing. It's going to become per trip or subscription, or at least a significant part of the revenue will. And then how do you build and deliver it? Today, it's big dealerships, massive brand budgets, big above-the-line campaigns, R&D, and manufacturing for cars, whereas tomorrow's offering is around direct sales, a la Tesla, skinny brand budgets, R&D manufacturing for electric pods, so that they can scale the offering. So it's wholly possible that some capabilities like dealerships that today are assets, but they could become liabilities or baggage in the new offering. Then if we look at enablers, so this is all about understanding how you're set up to deliver on your opportunity across 4 dimensions. So we'll start with data and analytics. So historically, data's been somewhere, often not where you want it. And when you find it, it's retroactive. So all it helps you do is understand what happened. Whereas where we need to be now is data needs to be everywhere. It needs to be available to measure everything. It needs to help you become more predictive in what you're doing as a business, and prescriptive. So we talk a lot about leading and lagging indicators. So lagging indicators are things that have happened in the past, and most financial statements are measured that way. Whereas in product design and development, people like Facebook are looking at daily active users as a measurement of the leading indicator of growth. So we should be looking at those leading indicators as well when we're looking at data. And then we look at systems and technology. So this is a huge part of it. And the days of IT being a department that helps the business should be over. Tech should now be in the middle of the business, driving growth and efficiency. It should be everywhere with data at the heart. So I think it's important to ensure that you have the right tech leaders represented at board level and drive this message throughout the business. And then there's quite a chunky one, which is operating model and partnership. So if you've nailed your strategy and business model, you've tested and experimented with new services, you found some wins, you have to get your operations right in order to scale. And whilst digital used to be about driving the lowest cost, it's now about creating the most flexible solutions through smart integrations. So, you think about Zara, that's how they became the dominant force in fast, flexible fashion. They digitized the supply chain to give consumers more of what they want. Sounds quite similar to Amazon, really, and they're both incredibly valuable companies now. And most companies looking to modernize their business come from a time when everything had to be done internally, but in our world where things move quickly and competitive advantage can be found in many areas, we need to start thinking about how to create and cultivate an ecosystem of partnerships. So this might be fully outsourced solutions like our client Bupa. They use Babylon as their virtual assistant. It might simply be a tech provider like Adobe or Salesforce. It might be your agencies or consultancies that you need to help plot and deliver some of the activity. But what you should do internally versus outsourced, and for how long? These are the questions you need to ask to get this part right. And then at the heart of it, as always, is talent and culture. So as digital becomes more widespread across companies, the old ways of working become exposed. So it used to be you went into a company, you stayed there forever. It was lifelong, you had one track. Whereas now, people, they're just not used to the faster, more iterative ways of working, and they're not skilled or trained. So unless you want to churn your whole organization, you need to retool. And we can't just pay lip service to this, because this is what will make the difference between a failed project and a successful transformation. Your people and culture are the things that will ensure the long-term return on investment pays off in digital. And just something to be aware that agile teams do not make an agile organization. There's a lot more that sits behind it. Then if we look at orchestration, so we've touched on this concept that experimentation is easy, transformation is hard, and we need to reimagine how we orchestrate the change. So there's a dimension that's happening, and this is profits used to be measured universally and equally, and actually the new entrants are playing by new rules. So if we think of Walmart versus Amazon or Ford versus Tesla, right, they're actually playing different games, because ROI used to be the measure for determining initiative success, but digital progress is now quite often tracked by other measures, such as future net asset value. And that's how Tesla's valued, that's how Amazon's starting to get valued. So the legacy businesses are struggling because they're not even being measured in the same way. And that's difficult because they have to make a profit for their shareholders on a quarterly basis. So then we look at decision-making. So for digital to be successful, we have to move from hierarchical decisions to viral decision-making. So we have to embed more viral networks in the company to push decision-making out and down. And then we need to we need to make that move from labs and hothouse environments to scaling across the business, because the best companies are good at breaking initiatives down into components that can be tackled by small, loosely coupled and empowered teams, and then finding the best way to deploy them and build momentum through the company. And the fourth one's quite interesting. So there's a popular misconception that digital delivery and agile means you can be a bit loose, but the reality is you have to be even tighter with your risk management and governance. You have to set clear goals, guardrails. You have to monitor the risk. You have to track the performance, and you have to know when to stop things that just are not working. And then the last one is funding. This is a bit more complex and it's a bit more advanced, which moving from project-based funding, where essentially you move from this grip of annual budget cycles while devoting sufficient resources to infrastructure. And this is about building closer relationships between IT and business to create teams empowered to invest in the areas that best support the business strategy. So really what we're talking here is that teams are spending money on outcomes as opposed to scope. And to get this right does mean that you've got to connect it all the way through the business, but that's where the most successful companies are doing it. And if you can master that, you will become digital experts. So what can we do to sort of think about, we're drawing to a close here. So what can we do to think about how is our transformation currently working? Is it under control? So there's a few questions that you want to start asking yourself. How many prototypes have actually made it to market at scale? So how many are making it out of that lab? Have we managed to reap measurable benefits from our digital investments? What's the payback for this stuff? Are we measuring progress against clear indicators of our digital transformation? And how many of them are leading versus lagging? Have we really course corrected against the initial plan already? Have we pivoted, or are we just moving forward blindly? Are we as an executive team really aligned behind a common digital ambition, or are we just competing for resources under a broad catch-all vision? Sound familiar? Have we engaged a broader company on that vision? And are we building a critical mass of digital practitioners instead of just an elite group of digital champions? And then finally, have we clearly defined and communicated the broader purpose of our digital efforts? And do we have a clear understanding of the duties that come with that across the business? So look, if the answer is yes to all of the above, you're in a brilliant state, and you can probably teach me what to do next. But seriously, I would say just use this benchmark for your own programs and work out where you need to get things under control. So as we really draw it to a close now, I'm going to give you a few final thoughts to leave with. And I think that's, as you move forward, we have to be able to adapt. What COVID has taught us is that we need to build fluency into the business. We need to challenge hierarchical decision making. We need to experiment, absolutely, but we cannot forget how to scale. And remember to address the 4 elements that we talked about here in every new product or service. Then there's ecosystem. This is not a single player, one player game anymore. We need to embrace external factors to accelerate the goals and leapfrog your competitors. And then finally, learn to love discomfort. Now, new is uncomfortable, but it is inevitable. We all have to learn new things to thrive in this new world. Don't get stuck in your old ways. Your customers and competitors certainly will not be.